Let's just wait one more minute for Ann.
That's good. No, okay.
Phil or whoever's on from RCTV, just so you know, we'll open the meeting in public session, and then we're going to vote to move into executive session till about 7:25, and then we'll be back to open session. Make sure I've not heard from Ann. I have not. Okay. Okay, I think we'll get started, and then I've just texted in. Hopefully she'll be able to join us. So RCTV, I'll give you a 3, 2, 1 countdown. 3, 2, 1. Good evening, folks. I'd like to call the Select Board meeting of January 5th, 2021 to order. For this evening, I'll just get to my deck here. As per our posted agenda, we'll have a motion to enter executive session until 7:25 p.m. approximately, when we will return to open session and then continue with our meeting. Carlo, could I ask you to read the motion, please? Hope you're on mute.
Yep. Okay. Move to go into executive session, including Counsel Greg Pagnini, BHPK Law, and Ivrea Freed, Harrison Harrington, Jody Mills, MIIA, and staff members Barbara LaSure and Caitlin Saunders, Priscilla, and or to discuss strategy with respect to litigation and pending actions involving 59 Middlesex Road, that the Select Board Chair declare that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the body, and to reconvene an open session at approximately 7:25 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vanessa. We will take a roll call vote to move into the executive session. So Carlo?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
And Mark votes yes. So we'll move to executive session and come back at approximately 7:25.
Sorry, I'm here as well and vote yes.
Oh, sorry, Ann. Thank you.
Okay, I'm late to the party.
Okay, so we'll move to our executive session now. Our vote was 5-0. So Caitlin, if you can escort RCTV and others out, accept those that need to be in the exec session, please. Okay, RCTV, we're gonna give it 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back. We're back into open session now, folks. I'm just going to do a quick update in terms of the meeting tonight and what our plan is. So just in terms of logistics, clearly we're on RCTV, Verizon 33, Xfinity Channel 22, as well as Facebook Live and YouTube. This evening it won't be 8 o'clock, it'll be closer to 8:30. We will have some time for public comment. I think, Caitlin, we have about 4 people, is that right?
Yes.
Yep, that want to speak, great. And our rules here are just need full name and address, not include disparaging comments, at content of not more than 2 minutes. Oops, sorry. I won't go through the clear resources, but there has been some discussion about making sure that we do have good resources available for folks, particularly on the mental health front right now, as times are a bit more trying. So we have a relationship with Elliott Emergency Services, which is a 24/7. Sorry. It's got a mind of its own at the moment. Sorry about that. So Elliott is 24/7. The phone number is 800-988-1111. We also work with Interface, and these are all coordinated through the Coalition for Prevention and Support. You can always get more information from them, from the town website under the Coalition. And any emergencies, please, you should be calling 911 directly. Now we can get there. So our Mask Up Reading program, and I'll leave that to others coming through. Here is a quick review of what we're going to cover this evening. We'll go right into COVID response. We have some liaison reports from various board members. We'll have time for public comment. Bob's going to go through a preview of the warrant. We need to close that on March the 2nd in our meeting then. Feedback on the budget presentations that we received, overview from Bob, discussions that we may have, and priorities, very importantly, to share with Bob in terms of what we're thinking toward that budget. Then we'll move on to the communication policy, which was in the packet, see what people think about that, any additional comments that are there, and then meeting minutes, and then future agenda topics. So without further ado, let me stop sharing my screen here. And Rick, can I turn it over to you, Dr. Rick Lopez, who is the chair of the Board of Health?
Sure. So I'm just going to give a brief COVID update. In terms of case counts as of noon today, we have about 290 active cases. That actually hasn't changed a whole lot over the last couple of weeks. It's certainly a lot more than the summer. And in sort of breaking this down, there are about 37 active cases in the school system, 13 at the high school, and the rest at various middle and elementary schools. We had a cluster of cases from Reading Gymnastics, which is located in North Reading. There were 6 active cases from that. And the gym, that gymnastics facility was closed, and the state is doing contact tracing for those. At Artis Senior Living, we have 9 cases, 6 residents and 3 staff, and they're doing mobile testing every Tuesday and Friday to track that at that facility. And I presume CVS and Walgreens are supposed to be going into long-term care facilities starting this week or next week for vaccinations. So I'm presuming that's going to happen at Artis very soon. There's been no COVID-related business closures in the last week or two. Household transmission remains the main source of spread, although you have to remember that that's because of the intimacy of household contacts. The real problem is where the virus is picked up outside of the household. And there was a handful of basketball and hockey related clusters the end of December, but none since the beginning of the month. In terms of vaccination, work has been going on to plan for phase 1 of the vaccination plan for first responders, which would be police, fire, EMT. Reading has collaborated with several other cities and towns in north of Boston, including Andover, Lynnfield, Methuen, North Andover, North Reading, Saugus, and Wilmington. And the plan is for Andover to receive the vaccine, and then they're going to transport it down to us, and which actually we got the vaccine, I'm told by Peter today, and we're going to be doing the vaccinations at the police and fire facilities. And so that's already underway. Let's see, and planning is going on for phase 2, which should start in February and be in the February-March timeframe. And that's for people over 75, people over 65, people with multiple chronic illnesses, and then a whole host of people who are in contact with the virus, including grocery clerks and transit people, and there's a sort of long list you've probably seen in the news. We are going to be launching an effort to educate restaurants in Reading on the COVID guidelines, or re-educate and ensure that they're following the guidelines. That's something that I think we need to sort of press a little bit on. And then lastly, we're developing, or have developed, and we'll be discussing on Thursday night, guidelines for the open ice rinks. We were concerned, and perhaps in retrospect, it would have been nice that the open ice rinks weren't flooded, but they were. And so these are the ones at Sturgis Park and at Birch Meadow and at the high school. And you know, there's a potential for large crowds to gather, ice skating, and spectators, parents watching, and pick up hockey games and so forth. And so we have developed some guidelines around numbers of people, mask use, and sort of behaviors around the ice rinks that we'll be discussing on Thursday, getting up signs at those locations to, you know, keep it on top of people's mind that, you know, there's a risk in large crowds there. And I think that's it. Are there any questions at all? Yes.
I had a question. I was wondering if Burbank Rink has been part of your planning. I understand that they're closed. That's what their website says. But then I heard that some of the Mass MDC rinks are open. I heard specifically Stoneham and Peabody are open. And I know it's all about capacity control and limiting things, but
We haven't, you know, there was an issue with Burbank back in early to mid-December, where there were some complaints lodged that that the hockey team had what's called captain's practices, I guess, where the captain kind of organizes teams to get on the ice, and they were doing this, and so there were some, I think parents probably complained that, you know, there were a lot of kids on the ice. And I know that Peter Morandi, our interim health director, did speak to the manager at Burbank, shared with him the guidelines, and that they're responsible for following that. But I haven't heard anything in the last week or two that's been a problem there. And I, you know, I'm surprised that they're closed. They're not closed per order of the Board of Health. So I'm
right.
not sure why they're closed.
Because we did get a request for them earlier from some funding for some PPC and some expenses they had. And
yeah, I can certainly follow up on that and let you know, and let the select board know.
well, I mean, they're outside of our purview. Is that correct, Bob? I mean, they operate independently. I guess they can do what they want. I just don't know why they would, if they have some flexibility to be open. I don't know what their decision making is.
Well, they are independent, but they certainly are very collaborative. My guess is, since schools have shut down athletics, they've shut down. You know, that's their biggest customer by far.
Mhm.
So until schools reopen athletics, you know, that's just a guess, but that seems reasonable.
Other questions, board members? Yeah.
I was wondering if there's been more progress in thinking through a possible testing site in Reading. I know, I think, Bob, you may have mentioned this, you know, for $30, something like for envisioning a model where for $30 residents could have access to PCR testing with quick turnaround.
I think that there had been, and Bob, if you were at Incident Command, I think there was going to be a discussion about that yesterday. And so you might update us, all, including me, on that discussion. I know that back in late November, early December, there was some conversation about, I believe, Hallmark Health having a program or thinking about providing testing for the community. And that seems to have stalled in the water. You know, I have looked at, there have been a couple other communities that have done testing. Winchester and Woburn have both done testing for residents. And it, you know, it's the kind of testing that is not, it's, if you're a resident and you want to be tested, you're tested, sort of period, as opposed to what typically happens if you go to your doctor, or, you know, where you have to have a medical rationale. You're either symptomatic, you've had contacts. So saying, I'm going to grandmother's house next week and I want to be tested is not covered medically. And the cost, you know, certainly at like some of the pharmacies and so forth could be, or your urgent care centers could be quite high. I did look into that, and those towns are using two institutions. One is called the Bridge Institute, which is a Harvard and MIT owned testing lab that is dedicated to try to do more testing, to do testing quickly and relatively inexpensively. And Armstrong Ambulance, which has actually been the, taking the samples. So they've set it up so that Armstrong comes to a site for 4 hours, probably by appointment. They get all the samples, they send it to the Bridge Institute. Bridge Institute communicates results in the next day or two. The issue that we looked at is the cost. You know, I know that there was some discussion at Winchester about doing more of this, and you know, it could be in the six-figure range depending on how extensive you're doing the testing and offering it, and how what you offer, what the residents have to pay is like $30 or $35. So I don't know where this has gone. I know that there's been discussions at Incident Command, and maybe Bob, if you have any more background on that.
Yeah, I can fill in a little bit. You're right that there was a vendor in town that was going to provide widespread testing. They went through a process internally. I received approval from CPDC and all related staff as to safety protocols. And so we sort of turned or pivoted to the vaccine as our focus, and noticed at one point a few weeks later that they were awfully quiet, and they've never really said, but they seem to have abandoned that plan, I guess is the fairest way to say it. I've heard anecdotally from a large majority of other town managers and mayors, some that have tried the widespread testing and some that have not, that it is not a good use of time or resources. It's such a snapshot in time at an instant. It may give a false sense of security to people because at, you know, Monday at 10 in the morning, they were okay, but, you know, Monday at 2 o'clock, they wouldn't be. And I'm not offering a comment on that. I'm just saying that's kind of feedback I got. And then from a financial standpoint on a call today, it's really difficult to follow all the rules. There was an official from the federal government today on a statewide call, sort of backtracking and backpedaling a lot of the former rules under the CARES Act and suggesting a different way to do accounting, which I passed along to Sharon and Gail. And so there's no easy choices right now. There's no easy paths. We're well set up for vaccine distribution. We still don't know, and Lieutenant Governor, or rather a Secretary of Health Undersecretary said today that the state has not decided how to distribute vaccines in phase two or beyond. So you probably read in the paper about 4 large sites, Foxborough, Fenway, and 2 others. Much to my surprise during the day, Reading was named as one of the sites that will be available for any first responder. And there's a broad definition of that. So, you know, as of yesterday, that was not true. And as of today, that is true. So flexibility is the key for sure. What we would like to do is to offer as much service to the community that we can personally do. So, you know, one of the residents asked me today, you know, are you going to have vaccine distribution, you know, for the residents? And certainly I raised it again with the state. We don't want residents to need to go to Fenway Park to get a vaccine because they're 75 or older. That's not a good solution. So I kind of wandered all over the place, but that's kind of what things are like right now. They're somewhat disjointed. I think the focus has shifted to vaccine, and testing is not considered at the forefront anymore. And,
I think I would agree with Bob that, you know, if you had to pick your priorities, I think that, you know, continued education of the community around what they need to be doing, focusing on hotspots and contact tracing, and thirdly, vaccinations is sort of really where the most important you know, efforts should be placed, and where probably there's going to be more better results in the long run. There was a lot of angst around testing before the holidays, I think because everybody wanted to be tested before they went home, but we all know that, as Bob said, you could be tested, be negative, next day come in contact, 3 to 5 days later become symptomatic. And, you know, what was all that about? I think people can get tested for, you know, as I mentioned earlier, significant medical reasons. But the sort of convenience testing it would be nice, but in the scope of resources and where maybe the other priorities should be, I don't think it's as high on the list. And I suspect that given that we're past the holidays, and that was causing a lot of angst between Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, I think there will probably, you know, perhaps be a little less focus in the community as well around testing. That's just my thoughts.
And Mark, if I could share my screen for a moment.
Yes.
This is a couple of graphs that'll go up on the website shortly. This is a little bit of graphical bias because it's a cumulative chart, but you know, it really jumps out at you that the confirmed cases right here, the green line, have just exploded around the holidays. This blue line is the active cases. You know, the better line is this one here, which is just the weekly increase, not cumulative. But you can still see the weekly increase here are higher than what we saw in the peak in April. And in terms of sort of looking at the more recent data from the fall, Jane notes that half all cases have been diagnosed since Thanksgiving. So half of our cases happened from March to Thanksgiving, and the second half have happened since Thanksgiving to now, which is only about 5 weeks. So it really does get your attention. You know, the Mask Up Reading was meant to get people's attention, but maybe things like this will really have to drive the point home. And I understand that, people are going to travel and people are going to celebrate with families. But maybe after the holidays have now ended, they could take another look at some of these figures and really give it some thought.
And we're looking, I think the post-holiday surge is, is this week and next week. I think that was some of the logic behind Mr. Doherty's going remote, at least this week, because we're expecting more cases, and certainly we've seen that.
Bob, do you happen to have that other chart, the one that takes the cumulative out? So this is something that's going to be going up on the, some of these things going up on the town website so people can see it a bit more graphically in terms of what's going on. I mean, if you don't have it handy, I do.
I'm not sure. I'll share my screen if this is what you mean, Mark. This line right here, the lower darker blue line, is the weekly increases. Is that what you mean?
No, let me, if I could just grab for a second, it's the same chart. If you take the cumulative off, you can actually see
Okay.
of what's, whoops, sorry, I jumped the gun.
No, oh, you want me to do something, sorry.
No, I got it. No, I've got it. Here it is. Yeah. So this is the chart I was talking about. So this takes cumulative off. And now what you can see is this blue line here is what's going on with active cases. And you can see it's kind of skyrocketing. And here, this little dip in the last week, it's still over 100 new cases. So the rate of increase went down, but the number of new cases is dramatic. And Bob, you made the point, kind of spot on. It's active. It's an issue, for Reading as well as for the whole state, for the whole country, for the whole world, if you will. Sorry, that one kind of struck me. Other questions for Rick? No, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. I really appreciate that. Thank you for investigating in Woburn and Winchester as well. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Bob, anything else you want to add on COVID updates?
While I'm here, I'll just mention, because I got a couple questions about the notes from the command sessions. This board and the Board of Health last received December 7th. December 14th, we did not meet. December 21st, we attended a state webinar, so there really aren't any notes. We do have minutes or notes forthcoming from December 28th and January 4th. I'll get those out to folks probably late this week or early next week. So we have yesterday's, and then the week before is still to come. But otherwise, there was a gap in meetings.
Other questions, comments? So the only other thing, just my perception from command, maybe it's a question to Rick, with first responders, it sounds like we do now have some doses of the vaccine. I know there was a discussion it would start next Monday. Is there a chance it might even start sooner?
What Peter told me is that they received the vaccine from the state was going to Andover, and then Andover was going to distribute it to those cities and towns that I mentioned, including Reading. That the vaccine, he told me today that the vaccine had arrived in Reading today. And so, the only, I think, holdup at this point is sort of getting it to the police and the fire and the EMTs. Whether it could happen this week, I'm not 100% sure. It would definitely, I know the governor had mentioned the week of January 11th, but it could even happen sooner than that here.
Yeah, as soon as it can, obviously.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move on to liaison reports. If I could, let me, because Laura is here. Thank you, Laura. One of the items I wanted to report on is the board had asked me to, or approved that I send a note to our legislators regarding safe elections and making sure that our legislators are aware that our election is in April. because the current legislation that's been passed only covers through March 31st. So I did send that note. I think you've been copied on some of the responses that have come back so far in terms of, let's think about it. I've pursued a little further to see kind of what's out there, what options might be there, what can happen. It seems that the best and perhaps only option right now is for us to really press on our legislative delegation. The information I have is that there are many municipalities that are going to be having elections between now and, let's say, June, and only about 15 or 20 of them are covered in this 3/31 date that somehow was passed. So there's a need to extend that if you want to have the issues of safe elections to continue. I did pursue a little bit, could we, is it possible to move the date? And short answer is no, not really. It requires amazing heavy lifting. Would it be possible to get a special home rule petition to go through? Town council is suspect about the timing in terms of getting that done in time. Whether it would be to try to have us covered by the safe election legislation, extending it, get it voted on, would require a 2/3 vote of both houses, both the House and the Senate. Seemed like a very, very, very heavy lift. I've been in touch with, and town council's been in touch with the MMA to see what could be done on that side. Everyone is aware of the problem. There are some people that are hopping mad about it. But the net is that we need to press our legislators to get this done now and get it done quickly. Laura, I don't know if there's anything you wanna add to that.
Well, I just wanted to just touch on the numbers a little bit, the legislators are aware, but if you take and do some of the math, with the way the local elections are throughout the state, there's 43 cities, which means that their elections are in November. There are 15 towns that have their elections in March. Therefore, there are 293 towns that have their elections in April and May, with just a few in June. So they're very well aware that they need to do something to help the majority of the communities within the state. I'm under the understanding, after having a lengthy conversation with Michelle Tessanari from the state elections, is that the legislators have been very heavily discussing on doing mail-in balloting permanently. And that's pretty much their goal. So that was the reasoning behind doing it until March 31st, because they thought that they could get that done by March 31st. So from the elections standpoint and from the Massachusetts Town Clerks Association legislative committee, that there's pretty much a 100%, well, I shouldn't say that, I should say 99% belief that it will be extended beyond the March 31st deadline. There's nobody has any kind of a doubt that it's not gonna be, so.
That said, I would encourage all of us, residents, whomever, if this is important to you, that we need to write to our state legislators and make sure this is front and center.
I agree. We definitely need to push them. And like I said, the Massachusetts Town Clerks Association, the Massachusetts City Clerks Association are very heavily pushing for this to happen, to be extended.
Bob?
And if it's appropriate, could you describe kind of what the legislative schedule is? I know the session that they extended I think is ending tonight.
Yeah, tonight is the last day, and it's going into tonight, the last night of the legislative session. So the new legislative session for 2021 to 2022 begins tomorrow.
Okay.
As of now, there is a bill filing deadline for timely filed bills of next Friday. It's possible that in the negotiated joint rules that could be extended, but for bills to be filed and be guaranteed a right to be heard by a committee, they have to be filed by next Friday. So, you could certainly impress upon, ask our legislators to ensure that bills are filed by next Friday. It's also possible that this kind of fix could happen outside of the regular committee process by way of a budget amendment, a supplemental budget amendment or something along those lines, which actually seems somewhat more likely, because in a typical year, bills, end up being assigned to committee and committee chairs appointed by March or so, and then they begin the hearing process. So that's a little bit of legislative process 101 for the start of a legislative session. But there, I guess, to be briefer, there are many ways that bills can become a law, but if you're looking for something to be filed in a timely way for the start of the session, that would be by next Friday.
If I might follow up, my understanding was that the current March deadline was a result of the governor filing a home rule petition on behalf of one of the communities. Is that a realistic option, or is that just fall under the generic home rule challenges?
Whether Reading should file a home rule petition?
Well, whether the governor should file one on our behalf, is that any different? I had just never heard of that before.
I don't understand what that.
Okay.
The governor can file bills. It does seem strange that the governor would file a home rule petition on behalf of a municipality. That does strike me as strange.
Yeah.
But
the city of Newton worked with the governor to get a home rule petition through.
okay.
I'm not quite sure who filed it.
The sponsor, but he made sure it got done, kind of thing.
I heard he was actually the sponsor for Newton.
It's possible.
It could be semantics.
The governor does have the ability to file legislation, so I hadn't been aware of that.
I'm just concerned because we're probably the first election after the March date.
Mm-hmm.
And most towns and cities or towns are usually May. There's not a lot of Aprils, right, Laura?
Correct. And most that are in April are April 6th. I'm not quite sure what the number is, but
Okay.
most of them are the first Tuesday. But the majority of them are in, over 150 of them are in May.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I'll keep my eye on it too.
Bob,
I'm not sure about the value of approaching the governor about it. I would talk to our legislative delegation. I actually can't be the one to do that, but I would talk to our legislative delegation to see if they would think there's merit in going that route.
Okay.
so just so that the board is aware, we are moving forward with the election, allowing any absentee balloting application to come in. With the,
Be careful what you say. Just pretend I said it. The town clerk may not have this best eyesight as she normally has.
With the I just want to state that we do have the blessing of the state to do this. So in other words, there will not be any precautions of us taking absentee balloting applications and not questioning people. We've never really questioned anybody. The disadvantage to that and not having the mail-in balloting is that there are going to be some that will refuse to do it just because of the no excuse is not in place. And then also we cannot mail out applications to anyone without them requesting it. Whereas, with this in place, we can automatically mail an application to every household with a registered voter. So, that's the disadvantage to it. And we also cannot advertise that we're doing mail-in balloting.
Oh.
So, the advantage of having absentee balloting is there for folks, and that's the way we're going to move forward until we're told otherwise.
further questions, folks?
Definitely want to contact your legislators though and get this through.
Yes, big time. Okay, great. Thanks, Laura. One other thing in terms of,
I have a question. I have a question, Mark.
please.
Thanks. Understanding that the likelihood of success for a home rule petition is slim, just due to the obstacles in front of us, would it still be an effective tool to help encourage the legislature to understand the urgency that towns like Reading are facing, since we're in early April? You know, would it be helpful if they get enough home rule petitions, will it encourage them along to make something universal, as opposed to voting, reviewing, and approving, I don't know, a dozen, however many April elections there are? Because we've already done the outreach. So Mark, thank you for that. But if they're not acting, do we need to take the next step? Worth a try?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that could happen is to propose it to the legislators and just say, hey, will this help? And if so, probably what we would need to do is do it quickly, which probably would mean having a special meeting just to get that accomplished, rather than waiting a full 2 weeks. I'm happy to do an outreach. Oh, Bob, go ahead.
I can just reach out to the 3 legislators and have this discussion. I don't think a real home rule petition is practical based on my knowledge of the process. Maybe a Bob rule petition might work. We'll think of something else. I'm sure they get it. I'm sure they know. It's just a question of they must be exhausted trying to finish this session. And it's next session's business no matter what. So, but I'll be in touch with all 3.
Thank you.
I'm curious, Laura, how long do you need in order to mail everyone the ballots, right? So the U.S. Postal Service, you know, I'm still getting, you know, holiday cards. So assuming we need to pad some deadlines a little bit there, or not pad that deadlines, but allow enough time for the mail to function. How much time do you need to print, ship, return, and do that whole application process?
Looking up the calendar right now to see what the exact date is as to when the ballot can be printed. So the last day to withdraw, so if you submit a nomination paper, you have the right to withdraw. The last day to do that is March 4th, which means that the ballot can be printed on March 5th. Generally, it takes a couple days for them to get to us, so we can start shipping them, sending them out around March 7th or so, depending on how that falls. That would be best case scenario, is that they can start going out March 8th. So when
do you need to know that you're allowed to do this?
So the applications need to start going out, should go out. I would say first week of February. I mean, we can send them out anytime, but for them to send them out, for us to get them sent out and get them returned to us, I wouldn't send them out any later than February 15th.
That's soon.
Ann.
Is there any option for the select board to move our town election a week earlier?
So I've explored this also, but Laura, you probably have the answer. Unfortunately, it's a short one.
No. So it could have been an option. However, once we started the process and started submitting nomination papers,
sure,
it's too late.
Okay.
It also is quite an involved process, starting with the town meeting and petitions, and unfortunately, the select board does not have authorization to just do that.
I do think that a bill that does this, for all communities has a better shot, particularly if it has the backing of the MMA and 200 something communities. I think that's has a better likelihood than, something that does something just for the town of Reading when they're in fact, what did you say, Laura, 200 something communities in the same boat? So.
293.
193 communities in the same boat. I think there's some strength in numbers there.
I did talk to Jeff Beckwith today about this, and
Great.
He's on the case.
Excellent.
Okay, so okay, so should I be sending out an email as well? I agree with Vanessa. I got Christmas cards back that were run through the post office processing, were not canceled, and now I got to mail them again. I mean, it's ugly. It is so bad.
So one thing that I've been in touch with the post office from a personal and professional level. They are extremely behind and suffering from the COVID issue. They're very short on staff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that needs to be taken into consideration, is that when we start mailing out those ballots, there's a chance they're not going to make it on time.
Mm-hmm.
So. Unfortunately. Bob, are you aware if Newton got the home rule petition passed?
They did, but they wrapped it into the larger deadline of March 3rd. Anyone with an election before March 31st was covered.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Let me do one more liaison report, then I'll open it to others. Attended the Commissioner Trust Funds meeting. And the big discussion there was what's happened to short-term interest rates. What's happened to long-term interest rates? Everything's really, really low. So it was hard finding returns even in the 0.5% kind of range. So interest income for this year is not going to be very good. The rates are just very low. And that's it. Oh, excuse me. No, I may come back after other people go around, but let me go round robin here. Ann, any updates?
Just briefly, given board members' concern relative to the police investigation of what transpired outside the polls, I did reach out to Chief Clark, and he said he hoped to have some more information for me by the end of the week, which I'll be happy to share with the full board at our next meeting. I also want to reiterate the request from HRAC. If board members would be willing to record themselves explaining what beloved community, the concept of beloved community means to us in the context of Reading and our service to this beloved community. They'd like to be able to use that footage as part of the MLK Day celebration this year. And I can, that footage needs to go to Kyung Yu, and I'll ask Bob, if you don't mind, to send Kyung's email address to the fellow board members, and I can send you an email with that, with Kyung's email address, as well as additional information about what kind of footage they're looking for.
Yes.
Hello?
I sent mine in yesterday, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
You guys better not leave me hanging out there. I want all 5 of
I plan to do mine, but I haven't done it yet. I'm behind the 8 ball.
Mark, thanks. I was going to ask Ann the deadline.
It's today, but they'll take additional. They asked if I'd be willing to reissue the call for more submissions. They're looking for more. So, thanks.
Carlo, any updates?
No, it's been quiet over the holidays. I know there's a rec committee coming up, and I don't think CPDC's happening in a few weeks, so there's a few other ones. Historic. No, sorry.
Cool, no worries. Karen?
Okay, let's see. I have an update and then I have a quick question. Okay, so I was speaking with Senator Lewis, and I understand, and Ann probably knows this, that the House and the Senate passed new environmental piece of legislation, and I didn't see any updates. Of course, it's COVID every day, so I don't know if the governor has signed it, but that's going to be really exciting in terms of how are we going to get to zero carbon emissions by 2050. And recently there's been concern that RMLD may have become engaged in a contract with a biomass plant, which has yet to be built, which doesn't seem very green. And so that's that may be addressed in this bill, and I don't know yet since it hasn't been signed off, but there'll be more on that coming. You know, biomass in certain forms is considered to be green renewable energy, but this particular plant is called the Palmer plant. They've been trying to get it built for 10 years, and it's just doesn't have a lot of public support and doesn't seem very clean. So while I had his attention, I told him the struggle we were having with green communities, that it really wasn't written for somebody with a municipal light department that has 4 different towns. And, you know, I've asked, what if we just change the legislation? If you say that's a DOER, like you can hear the sighs on the end of the line. So I asked Jason, and he said, why don't we go ahead and set up a Zoom with the right people, let all of our delegates know. And he said, let's see if we can get the folks at DOER and Green Communities, MAPC, whoever it is, to identify the parts that need to change to give us more flexibility to move ahead with green communities. And I was like, awesome. So I will do that. And that's that. That was that update. That would be great news. And then the question I had is, we've all been getting these emails about this MMA annual meeting, which seems extremely educational. And I'm wondering if this is something that we have funds allocated to the select board that we could take advantage of to go to this and go get some training.
Yes and yes.
Okay.
Is it a good idea? Yes.
Okay.
The cost is vastly reduced this year. It's usually an in-person thing. It's not this year.
That'd be nice.
But yeah, I think there are some excellent things. I can speak from my perspective. I know Vanessa and I went last year. I think you've gone a couple of times, Vanessa, right? Yeah. So from my perspective, great. Vanessa, you want to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I highly encourage everyone to attend. There's certainly a network aspect, obviously, that we're missing this year. It really is fabulous to hear from our peers and other communities on what they're doing. But the educational sessions that they hold are absolutely phenomenal. Highly encourage it. There is a women's lunch, Karen, and I do encourage you to apply to register for that as well.
So this will be a virtual eat your McDonald's.
And actually, Caitlin, I think, has registered some of us in the past for this. I think there's I just got an email, there's a reduced registration fee, I think, through tomorrow.
I think it's through tomorrow. Yeah, so the timing of this meeting is great.
Caitlin, could I ask you to register me?
Okay, if you could register me too, that would be great.
And for the WEMA lunch as well.
Oh, I have one more quick update.
Event.
One more quick update. There is a state program that provides money to communities for electric vehicle fleets and chargers, and they have money left. And so I just forwarded that to Bob tonight, because I'm not sure who needs to get involved, and also over to the Climate Advisory Committee. And I think I don't know if I sent it to you once or twice, Mark, but I just sent that a little bit earlier. So that's some good news. That's an opportunity for us.
Yeah, that would be great if we can get some costs covered, some more costs covered. That'd be fabulous.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa.
I'm with Carlo. It's been quiet because of the holidays. Thanks.
So one quick question: who is the library liaison? And do you want to?
Sure. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate your that. Amy Landon did reach out to both to Mark and myself, I believe, to let us know about tomorrow night's community conversation relating to race, and encourage community leaders to attend. Mark made the point we should probably figure out how to divide and conquer so that we don't have a quorum at the meeting. So I have registered, but I also can bow out if others are interested. I've been to community conversations in the past. They are excellent. I think this is certainly very much in line with some of the town manager and select board goals that we have discussed over the course of the past 6 months or so. So would certainly encourage us to be represented there.
But I think by 2, there'll be some other discussions in the future as well. I believe that Karen and I have registered also, and
Okay.
mentioned, and I don't know, Vanessa, Carla, whatever. I'm willing to go either way. I'd like to attend, but I can go to another one if that makes more sense. So I think we just want to have 2. I think we don't want, well, we're not posted, so that makes that easy. We go in.
This is like the rec meeting where I just watched on RCTV, but and Vanessa, you watched on I forget. You were registered and Carla was registered, but I just watched like that. I can unregister is what I'm saying.
I have a
Or just not
conflict,
show up.
so yeah, I have a conflict, so I can't attend. So you can take me out of the running for this one. I'm happy to attend a future one.
Okay, I didn't realize this presented a problem. I'm happy, and you take my spot.
Karen, if you haven't attended any in the past and would be interested in, you're welcome to. I also just thought we could also do kind of like a chime in and chime out. Like one of us could do like the first hour and the other could do an hour or something like that. I don't know if that would disrupt the flow of the event, but Mark's cringe makes me think it could. He thinks it could, but
well. So more than 2 of us can attend an event, but none of us can say anything, and that's okay. I was going to say I could attend and just promise not to say anything, but that might not work, right?
Yeah,
that doesn't work.
I think we're in a better place if we have 2 people attending, period.
Karen, why don't you attend? Why don't you attend? I'd be very interested to hear what your experience is like.
Okay, are you sure? Because I didn't even consider like open meeting laws, like ridiculous.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you for the reminder. I don't think I've gotten a reminder actually, so thank you. This was great, timely.
Okay, so if it's all right with you, I'd like to do this one, but if you'd rather go, then I'll back away.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, Karen, you and I. Okay, great, thanks. So we went round robin. Bob.
Thank you. 2 quick things. We have the final figures in on the rent and mortgage assistance. It was actually an equal split of renters and mortgage. Over 20 applications were approved for a total of over $60,000. So not too bad. Not big numbers for the community our size, but I'm sure for the people involved, and we heard from several, extremely meaningful, extremely helpful, and certainly a good time of year. So that went well, and thanks again to the Reading Co-op. We'll see what the new rules are with the CARES funds being extended as to what we can do. I also heard today that there's a new federal program going to be rolled out this month specifically for renters. So I will keep an eye on that. And lastly, you mentioned beloved community. There was no better example than yesterday. Feels like a long time ago. You've all read about a missing resident, and the usual kudos to the police department, fire department, DPW, all our partners who came in, but a special shout out to the public. It was a great use, a positive power of technology, I guess I'll call it. A lot of people shared information. There was actually a resident that went out for a breath of fresh air, came back to get the code red message and said, aha, that woman just walked by my house, which was true. So the police got several accurate tips and were able to, find this missing woman. And certainly the family, it's the worst thing that can happen to a family and the best outcome, especially in the winter. So thank you, especially to the community that was paying attention and how helpful they were. And that's all I have, Mark.
Awesome, thanks. We should also just give a shout out to you, Bob, too, as it relates to how quickly you worked with Reading Co-op putting together that program that helped, 20 residents. It was pulled together very quickly, very effectively. The message got out there. Some people who really needed the help were able to participate, and I think that's great. So thank you for getting that done.
Second, thank you so much, Bob and staff.
Awesome. Okay, let's shift gears. Let's go to public comment. It's supposed to be 8 o'clock. It's a little bit later than 8. Who do we have? Caitlin, who would like to do public comment?
Mike Lacey.
Okay, let's let Mike into the room. Hey, Mike. Sorry we're so far behind, but welcome. Thanks for hanging in.
How you doing?
Good, welcome. So far behind, but welcome. Oh,
Thank you.
Twice. Once is more than enough.
Yeah, right. I just want to say Happy New Year and thank you for taking the time to allow me to speak this evening. I just wanted to just circle back on the whole cell tower, water tower issue. I haven't seen or heard of any progress regarding the water tank replacement and would like to learn what has been accomplished since we last spoke about this. What has me concerned is history, potentially repeating itself. And the cell tower topic popping up, potentially with the third select board. As we all know, this has been discussed as a project with urgency now for years. I would like to understand what phase you are at with the new water tower construction and the process behind this, more importantly. Lastly, I speak for myself and, a fair amount of my neighbors and would more so appreciate a timeline and pertinent updates related to breaking ground of construction. So ultimately, what I'm looking for here, Mark, is process, what you guys have accomplished, in a timeline when you guys plan to break ground on this.
Got it.
Is that doable?
I think what we usually do from here is talk about future agendas. Actually, it's the last item of the night.
Sure.
But one of the things that I think we've discussed is updates in general and what should go there. So this would be a topic I think that we should put into that.
That'd be great.
Ask for an update.
Yeah, anyway, as long as myself and my neighbors can get that information, Mark, that'd be awesome. And I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Sure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Who is next?
Larry Hayes.
Larry Hayes. Whoop, Larry, we've got you 90 degrees off. There you go. Great, you're here. If you have us on in the background on Facebook or other things, can you please turn that down?
All right, thanks, Mark. Yeah, just again, my name's Larry Hayes, 29 Beacon Street, and like Mike was just calling in to check on the status of the water tower, and obviously just to voice our concern once again about the suitability of having a tower in a residential neighborhood. Again, we've just been on the obviously we made the board aware of our concerns, and we just want to follow up with any updates.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thanks for bringing it up. And you followed on Mike, who shared some similar thoughts.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Who is next?
Jackie McCarthy.
Larry, can we ask you to kind of cycle out and we'll bring Jackie in? Thanks. Oops. Uh-oh. There you go. You're back. Hey,
Okay.
folks.
Hey, Mark.
Okay, Happy New Year all. Thank you very much. Jackie McCarthy, 26 Beacon Street. My husband, Mark Delaney. We're speaking tonight to express our concern about the timeline for the water tank replacement at Auburn Street as it was described by the town engineer in his memo to the board in your December 8th packet. That memo indicated staff has had initial communications with Weston and Sampson and estimated May as the earliest possible date for the release of an RFP, likely later than May because of design, state and local approvals. It appears to us that this timeline would eliminate or at least put in jeopardy a construction start in 2021. And given the prior reversals and twists and turns of this project over the years, we're concerned that it puts our neighborhood back into a realm of uncertainty regarding this project and what happens there. It also appears to be inconsistent with town staff's comments back in July of 2018 during a presentation. They indicated that the full design of a replacement water tank was close to being done or in the final stages. So we asked the board to impose an accountable timeline to release the RFP as soon as reasonably possible. We feel that that would set into motion this project and give our neighborhood the certainty that we need.
Okay. 2 minutes up for her.
Yeah, she's good.
Tag teamed, huh?
She's very efficient. So happy New Year to all board members and your families. We hope a healthy and great new year for all of you. We appreciate your service. Very happy to hear that Vanessa's going to be running for re-election. Are you sure you want to do 4 more years, Vanessa? Well, we're glad that you do. In our neighborhood, well, 3 more years. We're going to give her an extra one if she wants. We'll actively be supporting you, our neighborhood, and looking forward to your re-election. I have a lot to say in the cell tower, but I'm going to defer to what my wife just said. The town engineer's memo raises 3 issues. When you dig into them, they don't hold up. Having said that, I have a comment to make on whether to do a home rule petition or not with respect to the elections. I think it's a great idea, and I think you should do it, and you should encourage other cities or other towns, I should say, to do it, because it's going to get legislators more invested in getting the matter addressed. So I think the MMA filing a general bill and municipalities like Reading filing their own home rule petition will get their legislators more invested in the process. I agree with Ann that March is when committee chairs and assignments get made. However, the House and Senate are pretty adept at suspending the rules and moving timely legislation through the process. And I think Reading is uniquely situated based on what I've heard, having one of the first elections in the state in early April. So my 2 cents, 30 years as a lobbyist, I would recommend you consider doing a home rule petition and encouraging others. It will certainly get people more active. Other than that, I'd have a lot to say in the cell tower, but I'm going to defer to that because I know you're tired of hearing me, and I'm tired of hearing myself on it to some extent. But we appreciate your time, and we wish you all a happy new year in the re-election of Vanessa.
So just to make a point for everyone, campaign-related things we can't have in front of the board. So I'd ask you to refrain from that.
Sorry about that.
Understood. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, folks. Caitlin, do we have one other person? I know
Yes.
Bob Connor, I think, was on the list too.
Yep.
Is that who it is?
Yes, it is. Letting him in now.
In moving timely legislation through the process.
Bob, we're back.
Reading is uniquely situated based on what I've heard, having one of the first.
Bob, you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
This is classic. Can we put together a bloopers reel like after 12 months of these Zoom calls?
Before you start, can we ask you to turn down, if you have Facebook or RCTV, if you could turn that down before you start?
Yeah, I did it.
Great, thank you. Please let us know who you are, for those of us who don't know, and your address, and then off you go.
Robert Connor, 7 Beacon Street. And I pretty much agree with everyone who spoke before me. I have some additional information. I spoke with a company today that does temporary cell towers. They work with all of the major carriers. They can go as high as 120 feet, which is as high as the water tower. So we would get comparable service, which of course that's the carrier's problem. They come in with portable towers, or they can put in what they call a monopole. It's up to, I guess, the carriers and whatever's decided is best for the site. They look at the site. It costs roughly $3,500 a month for the cowl, and that holds 3 antennas with a weight of up to 1,000 pounds. So even if you had to get 2 or 3 cows, you're talking $10,000 a month. And if the water tower took 4 to 6 months to build, the whole thing would be less than $100,000. Given that the town has made $1.5 million plus, God forbid we have to pay for it, we could afford to do that. The other thing is he's actually done things with water towers where he has a way of putting the on a permanent water tower, the fixtures on top of the water tower instead of the side, which would actually hide it more from view and actually give it a greater range. So he seemed to have a lot of options that I was very impressed with. I can send the select board the information about who this company is. And he seems like he has a lot of experience, done this many times. And I think this is a way to get coverage without putting a cell tower up. So let me know if you like this information.
If you wouldn't mind sending it to the town engineer, oops, sorry, to the town engineer directly, that probably would be the best place to send the information, unless others feel differently. No, please, that would be great. Thanks, Bob. It's helpful to have some numbers to be able to think about it.
Okay, thanks. Happy New Year.
You too. Take care. Okay, town meeting preview. Bob, can I turn it over to you? Pablo LaSure, that is, just to be clear.
Sure. I'll go real fast. The first several articles are standard, first 4 in this case. We will be amending the current year's budget. We do not currently have any prior year's bills, but that's always a nice placeholder. OPEB funds are appropriated annually. They're put in the budget, and then if not needed, they go into the trust through this article. Revolving funds, again, an annual thing. Housing trust fund, annual. And then there's a couple new things. There's 2 suggestions, and I'm not sure if it'll come from you or the Board of Assessors. We'll work on that. But there's 2 sections of Mass General Law that the Board of Assessors, assessor, and our Elder Human Services folks would like to see adopted. I'll write up some. I gave you some stuff in your overview, but one of them does not currently apply in Reading, and the other one applies very small, but there were just extra benefits for veterans. Then there's a couple of debt authorizations. FinCom asked us to increase the allocation to capital and debt for the next couple of years. So the draft plan you saw in December did that. 2 of the debt articles are ready to go. RMHS Stadium Turf 1 and Parker Middle School roofing. This way, if they're approved in April, we can actually work on the procurement and put out RFPs in time to shut this down a year from the coming spring. Particularly for the high school stadium turf, and then it will be out of service for late spring and summer and be ready for the fall. Parker would only be done during the summer, but authorization in April is a little premature. It could be November, but it'd be nice to put these things out to bid before November. And then there's the standard chapter, actually that's probably 22, FY22 Chapter 90 expenditures, the FY22 budget itself. And then there's a couple of placeholders that staff is still talking about. Some of the board members may remember the Mellet land discussion from a few years ago. The select board owns some parcels. Conscom would like to own some parcels. So this would be a discussion. And I'll work with the chair to get this on the agenda. It has been discussed years past and has just never moved forward. There is a federally required stormwater bylaw. We need to add this section to our bylaw. You've heard by attending CPDC, the zoning bylaw changes about outdoor dining, storage, and so forth. And then lastly, remove town meeting members is a standard article. The only other, the mention I made in the overview is your discussion next meeting of beer and wine potentially could lead to a town meeting article. At this point, I'm not aware of other articles. The other one in the distance is Eaton Lakeview and taking the road to be a public road when it's finished, but it is nowhere near as being finished. So that will hopefully be next November's action, but it had been thought to be ready long ago and they've been delayed by a variety of things. So those are the only articles that are on our radars at this point.
Any questions, folks? Nope. Let's roll on. Let's talk budget. I know, Bob, I know you have a time constraint tonight that we need to respect. So maybe if you can cover budgets here, that's, I think, probably the highest priority for the moment.
Okay. Yeah, let me share another screen. Just mostly for the public. And this was in the board's packet, just an overview of new positions added. I won't run through them all, but you can see some are small, some are large. I added the mental health position on the list for the police department. The police chief did not request that formally. So I'm interested in feedback from the board, and I suggested 2 ways to proceed. I think there's 9 things on the list. I think it would be very hard to rank them 1 through 9. I know it would be hard for me. Perhaps simpler is A, B, C, with A being very important, and whichever items you think is most important. I didn't want to say this before tonight, but because I didn't want to dampen your enthusiasm. But the budgets presented to you in December, including this mental health position, are about $500,000 over what we can afford. So this is not, a free shopping spree at the grocery store. I believe we can afford one of these things. Whether we can afford, 2 or 3, I just don't know yet. It's not going to be easy. I'll do the best I can. So guidance from the board, especially on your highest priorities, would be very helpful. And I know Mark had a nice method to proceed, if you wanted to show it, Mark.
Sure. So the idea, I'm wondering if board members had a chance to kind of go through that list and do A, B, and C. If you want, we can just kind of tabulate it. I've got a spreadsheet that I built that we could just put our A's, B's, and C's onto. Although it sounded like B's and C's aren't going to have great opportunity here. It may be that the A's are the ones that are more likely to happen. And that way we can get feedback directly to Bob and kind of all see it. I don't know, are board members interested in just kind of doing that, putting it up?
Sure.
Just doing A's or A's, B's, and C's?
I think whatever you guys have already done, let's do it. So I did A's, B's, and C's. So why don't we can just do that. Let me show you what I set up here.
I have a question for Bob, Mark, if that's okay.
Sure, please.
So Bob, I see there's the new public health director, which we've talked about, and then additional position or hours for the public health nurse. If we support one over the other, will the director be able to help compensate for the fact that, we may not have the extra hours or the extra position?
That's a really hard question to answer. I mean, a public health director cannot do the same things as a public health nurse. So we have 2 public health nurses now working part-time. It's nice to have part-time, first of all, because they make their real money in their real nursing job. And this is sort of community service, which we very much appreciate. I treat them as 2 different things because they have 2 different jobs, honestly.
Yeah.
So this is not delineated as such in the list that's in the packet and that you put up, but I remember in the presentation from Jean about the public health director position, she said she had, in her, this is everything I would want if I could have everything. She'd listed public, or she'd included a full salary for a full year for a public health director and additional funding to keep Peter Morandi on for another full year. Now, I certainly haven't had any conversation with our interim health director, but my impression would be that since he came out of retirement to assist us, that he may or may not have any interest in staying on longer term, and that rather than have a full year of an overlapping health director and an interim health director, it might make sense to have a brief period of overlap of an onboarding and training for the new health director, but we may not in fact need an interim health director for a year and a full-time health director for a full year's salary.
Yeah, that's an interesting point also, Anne. And I perhaps should have listed Peter. It changes every day, but last I heard, he's still interested in staying.
Okay.
I just sent him an email a few hours ago that this is way more work than I imagined he would walk into. We knew the winter was going to be difficult, but it is unbelievable.
Yes.
And I really appreciate the fact he's pitching in as much as he has. So at last question, I don't know, 10 days ago, he was very interested in continuing on part-time.
Okay.
So I would say he doesn't have to be on the list because I'd be able to do that regardless. But I would not say that his presence would slow down my interest in getting a new public health director.
Okay.
Honestly, if I can create a budget where the public health director is affordable, and with all due respect to FinCom and town meeting, I think we might advertise for it before July 1st and fill it. And that's a little backwards, but we really need it. Again, and that's if I can cobble together the funding. So I would agree with you that Peter's been a great resource and would continue to be very beneficial.
Okay.
Because we don't know how soon we can hire someone and what their background will be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But you would think that in terms of budgeting, though, it's hard to it doesn't seem to make full sense to budget for a full-time health director for a full year and an interim health director for a full year.
It's so hard to know, Anne. I mean,
okay.
We could budget for an interim position, and maybe we call him something else at that point.
Right.
Respectfully. But, 10 hours a week might fit him well and might be perfect for us. That'll be a Board of Health and a staff discussion. So
okay.
I would agree we don't need him the amount of hours he's ended up working now.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a full-time public health director, absolutely not. But in some capacity, he'd probably still be pretty helpful if he's willing.
Okay.
Carlo.
Yeah, Bob, I have a question on, I should have emailed you, but it says restore a code enforcement position. How long have we not had one?
We've only had one for a brief period of time, and it was funded at, I can't remember, I'll say 10 or 12 hours a week. And it had mixed results. It's a perfect thing to regionalize with other communities, but in the past we've found low interest in that. It's somewhat of a specialty also because each community has different rules. So it's really hard. You only need someone for maybe 12 hours a week, but it's really hard to do that job in 2 or 3 communities because they have different sets of rules.
Is there
So
no one
in
doing
the
it
past,
now?
we've had our building inspectors fulfill some of that, but it's not the same as having a real code enforcement person.
Bob, on that point, would the funding potentially come out of the building permit fund?
You know, I don't remember the exact figures, but I think town meeting has allowed a spending of maybe 250,000 a year. And I know we don't spend the full amount. So in theory, we would have a little bit of room, but I think we spend maybe 220 or 225. But in theory, with so much development going on, you know, and if town meeting authorizes the new projects to go in, funds will be plentiful. So that's a good thought. And we could always ask town meeting to increase the annual spend if it's really imperative.
Other questions up front, folks? Karen.
I wanted to clarify the civil rights officer, a sergeant, is that the same position where the police chief said he recommended losing a patrolman to have a higher paid officer be this sergeant?
Yes, what he actually put in his budget was a new sergeant from scratch, if you will. But he did offer to you and to me that perhaps just promoting an officer at a lesser cost would be another way to do that. So a new sergeant might cost X dollars, but a promotion will be substantially cheaper.
It would be, so would it be an incremental cost? It wouldn't be adding a whole new employee?
And that's the way right now I would look at it, yes.
Okay.
Is there, Bob, when you say, you know, we can, you know, we could do 1 or maybe 2 of these things. Is there, you know, the opportunity where we could do, you know, not the full ask of some of these items, but partial, like for example, a promotion in lieu of a new officer, and you know, less numbers of public health nurse hours, and you know what I mean, like giving a little bit instead of the full.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I said it'd be hard to do too many on this list, I meant adding full-time people.
Okay.
But yeah, you got to be creative and you got to say, okay, you know, you're going to get a promotion. This hour is going to increase, that hour is decreasing. So, you know, we might be able to do several things from this list at the expense of other things.
Okay, thank you.
Vanessa.
Thanks, Mark. Bob, is the civil rights officer position, is that a requirement for the, as part of the new police reform legislation at the state level?
I believe it is. Ann would know best.
I think it's a pre-existing requirement.
Yeah, it was already a requirement, but I think it's
part of the, it's not a new part of the police reform legislation, but it is a requirement, is my understanding.
Yeah, my understanding is now we have to designate a single person as opposed to just make sure the work is done. Then that may not be accurate, but that's the way I heard it.
So Mark, I know you mentioned earlier that we sort of have an earlier stop time than we normally would. I'm happy to just go through, you know, this list and give my A's, if that would be helpful to Bob. I don't know if we want to sort of go around the table doing that.
Yeah, I think let's just make sure there aren't any other kind of general questions, but I think that's exactly what we ought to do here is to kind of give them that feedback. Karen, I noticed you had your hand up.
Just one more general question. Not having any experience with the ability to hire mental health support, is that something we could get some hours? Like we're starting with 0, but I heard a lot of desire from that across our first responders. Could we get a part-time position?
Or maybe shared?
Yeah, maybe contract?
Yeah, either, I mean, yeah, we could contract it out. We could share it with other communities, or we could do part-time. I'm not expert enough to know what's the best answer. But if all you can afford is a part solution, that's how you start.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
I'm sure
Thank you.
long-term, when you think about it, if it's a resource to the department, it has to be available 24/7. So to me, that sounds like contracting out is probably a better solution, but then you want the hands-on Reading experience. So it's tough.
Hmm.
I think this is going to have to be part of the creativity. I don't know about you folks, but I didn't limit myself to 2A priorities. It's a bit broader than that. Maybe it helps in kind of pulling some other things away, more so than kind of saying, no, it's just this and this. But, again, I think it offers some creative options here. What I was going to suggest is maybe it's worth giving a couple of minutes of kind of just each of us kind of philosophy as to why we thought certain things are important or where priorities came from. And then, I mean, here's what I kind of put together. Is just kind of, listed them as they were on the sheet from Bob. Whoops, sorry about that. The wrong Zoom screen came up on my side. Sorry about that. Okay. In terms of what the priorities were, not talking about, I obviously can't full fund everything. I think the points that were brought up are great in terms of creativity, in terms of how to approach it, what Ann, Vanessa, and Karen and Carlo all said in terms of different ways. Maybe there are different ways of doing it. What I did here, just kind of to get it started, is I kind of, baked in a thought that, resident services are going to be the most important things we can take care of. It's very much on an operational basis. And I think social services and community relations are a big part of what we're talking about here. Strategically, I think we need to look at capital needs that we can anticipate, create a path toward accomplishing those goals. I would look specifically toward outdoor activities that serve all of our population. We know we're going to have school needs coming up. That will be a very substantial outside of the levy project. So hopefully we can see what's going on with that. But next to me was, how do we support our older and our younger residents? Some other kind of specifics, but that was kind of really where I saw things were heading. And that's what led me thinking in here in the public health area. I'm wondering the public health nurse hours, if that's COVID reimbursable through the end of 21. CARES Act kind of question. If it is, obviously that might make it a little bit easier. That's part of it. I agree with you on the health director need and maybe, see what the structure needs to look like after that. But, Peter, I think has demonstrated to us the advantage of having someone with that kind of experience who can kind of lead the activity and really bring it forward. Code enforcement, if we can get that from the building permit funds, that would be great. Rec program coordinator hours, I felt was a little bit lower priority at the moment. Public service clerical, I put as a lower priority. The civil rights officer to sergeant, to Vanessa and Ann's point, it is a requirement, I believe, for a person to be assigned, and I think that Chief Clark had said he'd prefer it to be an officer. And if that's possible through promotion, that would be great. I think police training is a very high priority. I think that just absolutely needs to be there. I was a very strong advocate on social work, mental health position, still am, but I found myself having to put it into a B as to compared to the other ones here. And then the social justice position, I think the town has had enough discussions in terms of human resource advisory, in terms of all the other activities. There have been lots and lots of discussions on how best to do it. There seems to be a structure in place that would actually allow it to get done. And I think that's something that we should be funding. I think we need to do it. So that's the basis of my priorities, and here they are. Someone want to volunteer to go next? Vanessa.
Thanks, Mark. So I decided to approach this a little bit differently. I picked my top three, figuring any sort of bargaining that we can do or compromising we can do, I sort of leave to Bob to manage as far as, what's a promotion versus a full-time new position, or what we share or do part-time. So given sort of the situation the town is in right now, my top priority revolve around what is going to help residents in the coming years is for issues that are resulting from the pandemic. And for me, those are the social worker position and the health director. The social worker position is going to help everyone in the community. It's going to support the police department. It's going to support human and elder services. It's going to support the Reading Coalition. You know, we know that substance abuse issues and mental health issues are rising. I think they're going to continue to do so. We need to provide residents with support. To me, the social worker is the absolute top priority. The health director, one of the things I've been reading about now with the pandemic is the long COVID effects for people that have tested positive. We already know that there are hundreds of people in town that are going to be affected by this. It's going to fall to communities to support residents. The health director, I think, will be absolutely critical for that. And then the civil rights officer or sergeant promotion, however, you know, Bob and the chief determined that. That one I think is going to be important too. I think all of these positions are worthy and important to the town, but if we have to put our top priorities somewhere, those are mine.
Thanks, Vanessa. Would like to go? Ann. Sorry, no, go right down the line. Ann, then Carlo, then Karen, as I saw your hands.
So I am, in my mind, going back to the town manager goals that we set. And among them were, you know, ensuring that our health department and Board of Health have what they need to protect the public health of our community in this pandemic. So in that vein, I would list the public health director and public nurse hours as A's. We also, in our setting of the town manager goals, discussed encouraging a more welcoming community, and as part of that, bringing the ad hoc committee's work and its recommendation to put forward a social justice an equity and social justice position within the town library. That was one of the town manager goals, and it also goes back to some of the conversations we had at our retreat. In that, and so for the board's edification, the library board of trustees unanimously endorsed that position, and the ad hoc committee at its final meeting on December 23rd also unanimously voted to endorse the position. So that being said, and I do think that this pandemic has revealed and brought to light, you know, holes within our public health system, as well as holes and gaps and inequities within our community, our state, and our nation. So I think that both of these sets of priorities are responsive to issues that the pandemic has brought to light. That being said, there are a lot of other needs within our community. And I'd say, you know, my next set of priorities, and I would hope that, you know, if we're looking, you know, as I mentioned earlier, asking Bob, could we, you know, partially fund some of these priorities so that we can, you know, spread the wealth a little bit across across departments. I would, the 3 police department priorities, I would count as B's, but I would hope that we would be able to get, some of these needs met in our budget. And it may mean partial funding of some of the asks in all of the categories, but I would hope we would be able to make some progress in those areas as well. And I would, you know, the remaining I would list as C's as not quite rising to that level. There will be a lot of new training of police required. The governor did last week sign the police reform legislation. So there are new use of force standards, new rules of the road for police officers that they'll need additional training on, no doubt.
Thanks, Ann. Carlo?
Thanks. So far, three of you have spoken, and I agree with a lot of what you say, but I took Vanessa's path in just doing A's. And public health director being number one, A. If there was a way we could rank the A, that would be my number one. And then, public health nurse would be like an A minus, but I know we can't do that. And then I also agree with Vanessa, as the pandemic continues, we're going to have so many struggles in town, in the state, in the country. But from there, I would jump to the bottom with police training, social, mental health, and the civil rights sergeant. Those would be my next three A's.
Sorry, police training.
Social work, mental health,
yep,
and the civil rights, which is a promotion. So that would be like an A minus.
Great.
And that's what I did.
Thank you. Karen?
Okay. Yep. These are all really important. There's also maybe some hope that we can find some grant money or additional funds to fund some of these. I would not say that any of them are not, I wouldn't say that any of them are unimportant, but the top would be that public health director. So that would be an A, and the civil rights officer sergeant, that would be an A. What I also heard the chief say is that he has a young force. I heard him say he needs help. So I think, I mean, I would never say training isn't important, but maybe there are other ways that we can get that training done. I would like to see that mental health position brought in. That was not just a police requirement, that was a fire and police requirement. And their work is less about, we keep saying it's less about fighting fires, and there is a stronger need for supporting the community. And I trust that they could share whatever hours we were able to come up with for them. And hopefully we could do that on a as needed basis versus hiring a staff person at this time. And the equity and social justice position, we've been talking about that for over a year. That is really important for our community. So again, I'm just going to stick with, we've been in a pandemic. We've been in, I know this word has been stricken from, we're not allowed to say unprecedented anymore, but these are the things that I think we need to prioritize for dealing with the times we're living in.
Bob, and Caitlin, I'll just send this to you. So any other budget related comments board members want to share? So those are kind of the priority ranking. Anything else that we want to share with Bob as he's going through his thinking? Karen?
Getting back to the town manager goals. So Bob, have you found a place to put in there where we can move forward on electric chargers, transitioning our fleet to electric vehicles? This is the right time for you to work some magic.
If that's already in the capital plan in a couple of ways. I won't explain it all now.
Okay, thanks.
In terms of the fleet, but in terms of charging stations, we know RMLD has some funds, is interested in, we just still need to meet with them.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other things to share? No? Great. Okay, I've saved that and we'll send that. Let me come back to my agenda for a second here, sorry. Select board communication policy. Anne, can I hand the baton?
Yes, so I've been working with Bob to update the policy reflecting our last conversation, as well as our last conversation as a board, as well as some feedback that I received from Karen relative to the stationary piece, with some insights and edits from town council. So let me go to the draft.
Do you want to share your screen? Do you want, what up? You want me to share my screen?
Sure. Yeah, if you want to share your screen, that's fine.
Okay, what page do you want me to be at?
Let's see. Well, would fellow board members find it most helpful to look at the clean version versus the track changes version? What would you prefer? I know people sort of learn and absorb information in different ways. Is it more useful to look at track changes, or is that overwhelming? Track changes, votes Vanessa?
No, I was going to say, I went through it, both clean and track changes. I have 0 edits. I think it is phenomenal. You did a wonderful job. So I have nothing to change.
Thank you.
I would just echo what Vanessa said. Exactly. I read through it. It looks good to me as it is.
Okay.
I read both versions, the clean and the edited.
And Bob did email Mark and I to say earlier this evening to say that he supports this version, and also if there are changes that a quorum of the board would like to see that are manageable, also would support that. So
The question, and thank you. This is great. Glad you took on this, and I appreciate it.
Sure.
So the stationery that we can use, I've gotten some pushback from staff on the use of the town seal. Then I went and I can pull it up again, either in our own select board policies or in our onboarding manual. It says that the select board has a purview over the use of the town seal. So I don't know if we need to specify that the stationary electric, I'd like to see board members have the option to have, this is wordsmithing, and or electronic and written, not a choice. You can use both, or one or the other. But I would like to make sure that, if we're going to have stationery, it looks like stationery coming out of town hall. And I'm not sure what the pushback is on the town seal, but it looks to me like it's under our purview to use it on our own stationery.
Okay, so you'd like it, I'm sorry, you would like us to have access to both hard copy and electronic stationery?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that it include the use of the town seal. Which isn't inconsistent with what our own legislative delegation does.
Yeah, I think it would almost be odd if it didn't. If the stationery didn't, it would seem not real.
That's what I'm concerned about now, the fact that we really haven't this. I just, even if, again, I come back to, even if you're writing a thank you note, like it just, nobody, or you need to ask somebody for information, you represent who you are and you have nothing to back it up. Like, okay, that's the only, everything else looks great. And glad we won't be making open meeting law violations.
Yeah, that was a point that Karen had unearthed and run back by town council. And Bob and I had edited it out, was the correspondence of this type shall be copied to all of the other members of the select board and to the town manager, that if we actually followed that policy, we would be
all be in trouble,
in violation of open meeting law. So,
and luckily we don't do that anyway. We're ignoring that part of it
for board members, and the policy spells this out, to represent that you are only speaking for yourself and not for the full board, unless the board has designated somebody to write on behalf of the full board. In use of stationery, that's what we need to do.
Yeah. Great. Carlo, anything you want to comment on or add or subtract?
No, I read it. It's pretty much everything we discussed last time before Ian went and finalized it and got, things sorted out with town council and stuff.
It's not fully sorted out by town council. Karen had run this one question by town council, but we haven't given the full draft. So we still will need to run the, with that, incorporating any feedback from tonight, run that by town council. And then I think we have to have a public hearing, if I'm not mistaken, to adopt a new policy.
That's correct.
Yeah.
One question as it relates to, I'll call it the tracking system, but the ability to monitor and kind of keep things flowing.
Right.
I suspect you didn't get into a lot of detail on that yet, but I think that that's one of the important areas for us to think about also, is kind of how that works, who takes responsibility for it. Is that something that we should kind of, let's kind of get this core done and then let's talk about how we might do that? I think
my impression, and I don't want to speak for Bob, but my impression was that this would be something that the town manager would have responsibility for, the tracking system, because the town manager would be, reporting back to us from what he had tracked. So I think it would be sort of within the town manager's control and responsibility. But that's certainly something we can discuss more explicitly with Bob. But that was the impression I had. We didn't talk specifically about, will it take the form of a database or an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc or some other, we didn't go into that level of granular detail, but I think that my impression was that it was something that Bob would be charged with maintaining and reporting to us on a regular basis.
Yeah, that sounds great to me. I had put together some thoughts that I had shared with the board, and actually we'll end up in 12, 18 minutes, Caitlin. Is that the right spot? Okay. So I had shared it with the board on screen and put it together. So it just, again, not meant to be a final product, but to contain some of the things that I thought would be important in tracking the request, the next steps, who's responsible, the dates, when it should come back up, some things like that. And again, I agree with you. I personally think that town manager should be tracking it, driving what's happening on it, but it needs to be some kind of an accessible document just so that we're kind of seeing what's there. The goal is to make sure that we're closing the loop on things, or from my perspective, that was the biggest gap, was how do we make sure we close the loop?
Yeah, I'd say one piece that I had given some particular attention to together with Bob was, how to close the loop around issues that come to us from generally from a resident relating to town staff. And so I just wanted to make sure everyone had seen that, and that the approach that Bob and I discussed seems workable for folks.
I thought I did, but let's make sure.
Yeah, and I can, let me pull that up and read that aloud. Oh, and maybe I'll let you know, Mark, where that falls, and you could screen share.
Is this point 4 on?
Yes. Maybe I'll go to the clean.
Yeah, I've got the clean one here. Let me. Is that the point right there? Town manager encouraged to apply directly to the center, and then it's
up in that second paragraph.
Right.
If an inquiry relates to interaction with a member of town staff, the town manager shall provide all relevant updates to the board as permitted by law or pursuant to the advice of town council. The town manager, the ombudsman, and the human resources director are all available to the public as may be helpful for further follow-up on the inquiry.
So I'm just thinking this through for a second. So assume that that's in place. There's also an expectation that the town manager will then bring us to the board at the next meeting or an upcoming meeting. Is that something that we're thinking? And if so, it should be here probably.
Shall provide all relevant updates to the board. So all relevant updates to the board. So what greater specificity would you like to see?
So as permitted by law felt to me like Well, I guess not true. I'm thinking about, so how could that information go out? One is the town manager could share it with the entire board in a no discussion. Number two would be to bring it up at the next board meeting. I guess those are the clear ways to communicate outbound. And I guess that's what permitted by law means.
And it's also part, it's just providing a little more specificity around issues that are that would so I would say the second paragraph here is a subset of issues that are also covered in the first paragraph of 4. But this is just providing some more specificity when it's relating to a member of town staff.
Great. I think that covers it.
So I think it's still, you know, the town manager to update the entire select board on a timely basis, either through email or at the next select board meeting would apply to issues involving town staff. But in addition, you know, all relevant updates as permitted by law. There may be more constraints in that sense, but than other issues that might come up. But the town manager, the ombudsman, and the human resources director are all available to the public as well with these specific kinds of issues that might arise.
Great, thank you.
Okay, great.
So do you want to, if there aren't any other comments, take it, run it past town council?
Yes.
Make sure that it's clean, and then we can get up as an agenda item and schedule a hearing.
Perfect.
Okay, awesome. Back to our agenda, approve meeting minutes. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so we have 12:08 and, sorry, I'm just scrolling.
12:09. If I'm right.
12:09. Yep. Okay, any major comments on these? Let's start with 12:08, sorry.
I don't have any edits to either of the minutes.
Nor do I.
I had a couple of housekeeping comments on 12:08. Why don't I just put it up? Sorry, there were so little that I was kind of on page 4. Actually, no, I'd be open to a delegate and CPC, but not when it comes to changing parking on public property, I thought, or was it parking or public property? I think it's on.
Okay. Page 4.
And then a couple on page 5. Staff working relationships. He suggested he and Ann Landry rather than him. And then one, sorry, this one was missing. I think that we agreed to have, so Vanessa's comment about suggested having other board members have the conversations. I think what we agreed to is that we would have board members set up discussions in groups of 1 to 2 members.
I think you did that at the next meeting, the 12/16.
Okay.
So you had 4 meetings in December, and these are just the first 2. So I think in your last one, 12/16, this was a topic, and that's when you really decided on what exactly to do.
I think you're right, and I think that's when I made the list. Okay, great.
Have
So
those ones.
Great, so I deleted that one. Okay, I'm set with that. Any comments on 12:09 from folks? I have no comments on 12:09. We're good. Okay, Carla, can you set up, I'm sorry, let me get rid of this. Have a motion to accept 12:08 and 12:09 as amended?
Motion to approve the minutes for December 8th and December 9th, 2020 as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Karen. Any further discussion? None appearing. Great. Let's take the vote as I'm seeing you on the screen. Vanessa,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Carlo,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Mark, yes. Great. Let's talk about future agendas. I created a little bit of a list. Let me just see if I can find it. Okay, here it is. So this is kind of, I culled from the documents in our packet to make sure that we were covering most of the activities there. This is what I have. The first few in order, I think, based on what we had talked about for the next meeting so far, but just to make sure. So appointing of volunteers for historic district and historical or historic. Go ahead, Ken.
There's also a few others that the VASC met with on Monday or yesterday, last night. So there's a few other volunteers to a few other boards that happen to come in, just so you know.
Great. Okay, and other. Oops. Okay. Town manager goal update. Bob wanted to do that in January, and just I'll confirm with him that he can do that for the next meeting. Update on water tank planning and next steps. I think we have heard from some residents. I think we should have a little discussion about that. Karen.
Thank you for putting that on there as an agenda item. I was brainstorming this week. I had another conversation with the resident, and so what we're hearing pretty consistently is that they feel that the communication is too lean, and they feel they don't have insight into this project, if I'm summarizing. And so this started getting me thinking that, this is a large construction project. It's not a building per se, but it is a large project with a lot of impact on the neighborhood, not unlike the library project. And so I reached out to the library director to ask her if there would be some lessons learned about how they manage that process. Because I was on the library building committee at that time, and there were a lot of concerns from neighbors about what was going to happen to their neighborhood. And this project, when it gets started, could take up to 2 years. So she said she would try to go back over her notes and give me some feedback, and I can bring that back to you all. I wonder also whether the permanent building committee might be a good forum to somehow get the neighbors to have a regular update. And even, I think I might be getting a little ahead of myself. We've been providing updates, but should we just have an update like we had for the Birch Meadow master planning? It should be not just a select board forum, but a community update. Like, here's what's going to happen. I'd like to see this instead of coming to us. I'd like to see this be a project that's managed like other projects, where we're very cognizant of there's going to be concerns coming in, and we need to have a steady form of feedback and information and a way for residents to have a say in their own neighborhood. So I didn't know what the rest of you thought about some of those things. So we could talk about that when that agenda item comes up.
Why don't we do that? I think that's a good idea. And then I think it'd be, I'm sure Bob and Ryan may want to offer some thoughts also in terms of what they had envisioned.
Okay.
So why don't we work that through there? Discuss outdoor dining and activities planning. So there are a lot of pieces related to this. There are articles for town meeting, or an article for town meeting being proposed. There is what I'll call the interim from today until any potential town meeting article were to be approved. And I think we want to make sure that we've got the red carpet out in terms of trying to be helpful to folks. So I think we should talk about that. Potential hearing on Verizon cable TV contract. That would be something that would come through Matt. We'll have to see what that looks like. Discuss beer and wine only package store licenses. I believe that we'll have the feedback that was requested for the 19th. So put that there, and then at that meeting, we can discuss what our next steps would be. Downtown parking. There's a potential for creating an advisory committee to that group. And I think Julie is the one that would be sharing with us what her thoughts are on that. I don't know what this, I don't know if MA's Massachusetts Downtown Initiative activity is. I'll find out, sorry. The MVP, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness, to get an update on what's going on with that. Open Space Plan, so a number of plans, the Open Space Plan, Birch Meadow Master Plan, to have presentations from planning on each of these. Karen, your point before, sustainability, electrification, singular Reading opportunities. And this comes back to kind of discussion with RMLD. I think there are pieces here that relate to RMLD and us potentially, and there are certainly some pieces that are staff on both sides. That we just want to make sure are on track, that things are happening, the activities are taking place. I think Karen is a great find on monies that might be available for vehicles that we could apply for. That might
Well,
be.
thank you for suggesting I go look.
Sorry. That, that would be great. I mean, if we can get a big chunk paid for, that'd be fabulous. We talked about a town-owned land status. What do we own? What's going on? It may be that there's not anything, but it'd be good to kind of keep that front and center in terms of what's happening. And I added kind of economic development update, just status of COVID assistance plans, other plans. I know that, Erin has applied for and received some grants. How's that going? I think it's time just for kind of an update. It's not quite as much the, hey, here's necessarily the Reading of the future. I think it's very much, the Reading of the present, and see what we can do with that. Are there other items that folks are thinking of? Carlo.
I forgot to ask Bob earlier, but is there any update on the reduced fees that we did last month for the liquor licenses?
Sorry.
Yes, I actually just processed the refunds with finance today. So checks should be going out either, I think if they're processed today, checks will go out Monday, I believe, for them.
Thank you. Did we get an answer from town council on Pamplemouse's license?
I'll have to check on that one.
Thank you. And so that covers that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it may be that Bob just kind of covers that, but this is meant to be kind of what's up. Sorry, Vanessa.
Thanks, Mark. Oh, it's funny, I lost train of thought. Oh, the budget. Okay, thank you. Are we having a follow-up discussion with Bob on the 19th to further discuss the budget? Because this was fine. It hit sort of the 9 big asks that he put forward, but I'll be honest, spending 10 minutes and ranking them ABC was not, as far as providing guidance to Bob, that makes me a little nervous if that's all we're doing. Because one of the things that I think we haven't discussed is, while those positions are new or expanded roles for existing positions, one of the things we haven't discussed is doing a deep dive into what the current budget contains. And are there places that we can reduce, not fill a vacancy that's created because someone leaves or because of a retirement that is anticipated or something like that. So before we start sort of making a Sophie's choice here, I would like more of a conversation on what we can do elsewhere before we start pitting some of these things against each other.
Bob mentioned that one of the things he is planning to do is kind of a zero-based structure, kind of build up from the ground and see what things would look like. And the point of that is exactly what you said, Vanessa, to highlight maybe there are some trade-offs. Maybe some things that are identified on that list are higher priority than some other things. And to kind of look critically at it that way. So, but I think having a follow-up discussion makes good sense. Let's see if the 19th is the right date, or if it should be the 19th and the 1st Feb as well. Carla.
Thanks. I'm new to this. Is this what FinCom does? Don't we follow FinCom's guidance to a point?
So, so FinCom ends up being responsible for the budget after the approved school committee budget, which comes from the superintendent, and then the town manager's budget. So our input is now, as a board, to the town manager's budget, and conceivably as citizens to the finance committee, or since we've been meeting in joint meetings with the finance committee through financial forums, offering feedback there as well in terms of what we think is important and priorities. So this is really our chance, working on the town budget specifically, although Bob owns it, and he also owns balancing it. So taking the school budget, the accommodated costs, and the town budget and balancing it. He owns that responsibility. That goes to FinCom. FinCom then takes it, they have their discussions, and then they present it to town meeting. And then town meeting has to approve it or amend it. So I think the short answer to your question is this is an important chance for us to have input into what's going on in the town side budget. Other items that, I mean, obviously we can't handle all of these in a meeting or two, but anything else that just we're kind of generally thinking? Carl.
I know we talked about it. I forget what meeting it was, about the road to the dump and the dog walkers and the blind spots, and I don't know if we could follow up with Jane or engineering on what possibilities, for people just walking in the street with cars in the road, and leading to the dump in the town forest. I don't know if there's anything that, I know it's a tough situation other than widening the road, but I know we talked about it several meetings ago, and the issues there, and it's been ongoing, obviously, before my time here, but it seems to be a problem that's not going to go away until maybe someone gets hurt, and then we'll do something.
That's a good one. I have a feeling Bob is going to suggest that come to the PTTF as kind of its first stop to think about it and talk about it, and then maybe come back after that. I don't remember this discussion. What I do remember is when there was the construction that took place on Grove Street. There was an issue of what access dog walkers would have to the town forest during that, and the fact that the side of the road was going to now have bales of hay, blocking off the lack of path. And that part's, I believe that's done. I think it's done, it's paved, it's finished. But I think this is a good point too, to let's bring it forward and see where it goes.
No, you're right. Now it's coming back to me. Thank you.
Oh, no worries. Anything else? No? Okay. Any other business we have to deal with tonight? Cool. Carlo, can you offer a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, let's go around the horn here. Karen?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
Carlo?
Yes.
Mark? Yes. We are adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Happy New
Thank
Year,
you.
everyone. Take
Yeah.
care.
Caitlin.